Hey everybody, this is Pat Torpy from Mr. Big, and you're listening to Music Mania.
You ready for some screaming heavy metal? We rock!
But the evil that men do lives on.
We gonna bang your head!
You are now listening to the Music Mania podcast, brought to you by CD Warehouse in Gladstone, the #1 hard rock podcast in the Midwest, featuring hard-hitting interviews with rock's living legends. And now, here's your host, Clint Switzer.
Welcome and thank you for joining me for another edition of the Music Mania podcast. I am Clint Switzer, your host. Thank you so much for subscribing, for downloading on iTunes, watching on YouTube, whichever format you choose. We always appreciate it. And our guest this week is going to be the enigmatic Lawrence Gowan, the frontman from Styx. What a great interview. We were able to catch up with him earlier in the week, and Styx, of course, has released a new album. It's called The Mission. It came out, it's been out since June, actually, so it's had some traction. I tell you what, it's a very good album. Lawrence Gowan adding a lot to it, especially, I think it stands out because obviously in a band like Styx, Lawrence and Tommy Shaw kind of split the singing duties on these songs, and Gone, Gone, Gone is one that on The Mission that really stands out, and that's with Lawrence on vocals. Of course, Lawrence has been in Styx since 1999, and as he'll talk about, he is very open about how important all eras of Styx are. Of course, Dennis DeYoung was in that role for so many years and kind of off and on there. And of course, Dennis is now doing his own version of Styx. Dennis DeYoung of Styx, playing the music. But Styx forges on, with Tommy Shaw, with JY, and Chuck, and Lawrence Gowan, of course, in that keyboardist frontman role. Does such a tremendous job on all the classics, of course, and really stands out on this album, The Mission. Of course, you can go to styxworld.com to find information on how to get that album. Of course, it's on Amazon, Spotify, iTunes. Be sure to pick up that album. Support a band like Styx. It's still out there, and it's a concept album, and I think Styx has always had that kind of mystical quality about them that makes an album like this about a mission to Mars. It just seems to make sense. And of course, Styx is out on tour right now, as they often are, and we're going to talk to him about the tour. They're doing a Vegas residency coming up here in just a couple months, and out on the road as always, kind of in support of the mission. Lawrence is a guy, he's in his, I believe it's his 19th year. I mean, he joined in 1999. He's very much a part of this band, and I believe that the live performance is better with Lawrence in the band. I know that could be controversial, seeing as Dennis DeYoung was such an integral part of Styx, and those are obviously the early albums up until his departure. Lawrence is just a great guy, an unbelievably classically trained singer, keyboardist, top of the line. He is unbelievable, and we are going to go ahead and bring you this week's interview with Mr. Lawrence Gowan from Styx.
Hello there, Clint. This is Lawrence Gowan from Styx calling for you.
Oh my gosh, that's the best. I think that's the best intro we've ever had here on the show. Lawrence, how's it going, my man?
Hey. How you doing?
Oh, we're doing great here. Thanks so much for calling in. We're, of course, things are picking up. I mean, you guys right now, Lawrence, as we just dive right into things here, are about as busy as the band has ever been. You just released this album, The Mission, in June. Lots of dates coming up. You've even got a mini Vegas residency coming up here in not too long. I mean, things are really heating up, aren't they?
If they were any hotter, it would be going into summer.
Yeah.
But we're going into winter, and nothing has let up at all since The Mission was released. And for Styx, we are people who are extremely enamored with what we are privileged enough to do on Earth, and so we love the fact that there's this insatiable demand to see the band and to come and enjoy this epic adventure that it has been going now for nearly 5 decades.
It has, and for you, for 18 years, which, not trying to date anyone here, it's almost unbelievable that you've been in Styx for so long, and that you're just such an enigmatic performer and such a visual performer. All things that I love so much. You've just done such a wonderful job. And talk about this new album, The Mission, because I think that for you, do you find it important with these studio albums, especially The Mission, because it's kind of a concept album, that you make your stamp on this band with your work on these albums, on the studio albums? Because obviously everybody knows the hits from Styx's past, but these songs you put your stamp on, that's got to be important for you.
Well, of course it is. It really is. You know, it's a big chunk of my life now. You know, being Styx. It's I'm in my 19th year. I'm coming up on 2 decades, so that's like a third of my time on planet Earth. So it's very important to me. Now, having said that, I do love, you know, the live shows and kind of celebrating the legacy of the band and what it's meant to people for decades before I was even involved. You know, I mean, that's very rewarding as well. It's wonderful to see that unfold every night. And to be a small part of that. Over the course of time, there've only ever been 10 people in Styx, and for a band that's nearly 5 decades old, that's a relatively low number. So it's a very great position, a very elite position to kind of be able to be in. But having said that, the lifeblood of a band really comes from, you know, new ideas and risking putting yourself out there in a way where you're coming up with something new that is inevitably going to be compared with something you've done in the past. And I think part of the reason that we took so long to make this record was making sure that we had something that we could look each other in the eye and say that I think this comes up to the standard and is equal to what has preceded it and can be listened to, you know, back to back without people being let down, so to speak. Because that's really what we do in the live show. We try to, you know, somehow find a way to exceed or surpass what the band has done in the past, and that's quite a challenge because people have so many, you know, such high expectations for what Styx can do.
Well, if my research is correct here, you've played over 1,600 shows with the band. You talk about trying to, you know, make things better and for people to see something different every time. I mean, that's unbelievable. 1,600 shows for you in this band. And I think that one thing about it, when you see Styx live these days, I think that your performance really stands out. And I think it's something that you look at and look, I love Styx. I love classic Styx. I, you know, was raised on the Grand Illusion and Crystal Ball like everyone else. I love what Dennis DeYoung brought to the band, but I do think your performance brings a lot. In fact, the first time I saw you, I was sitting so far away from a distance. I was like, that guy, he's got to be like 20 years old. You look from it. I was like, because you just have this enigmatic way of performing. I think that's what, when you see Styx live now, that stands out so much. And I think that that's something that I hope that you know from a fan's perspective that your performance really does stand out these days.
Well, of course, I'm really happy and, you know, very, very pleased to hear you say that. That's fantastic to hear. I look upon it as we are a band that really is the culmination of the efforts of everyone who's ever been in the band. You know, so as I mentioned, you know, all the people that have through every era of Styx, it's like they were the right person was on the stage during that era. You know, that's the way the band feel. And you know, when Tommy Shaw came into the band, they'd already done 5 albums,
right?
But he was the right person to walk on stage or to enter the scene at that point, and he was the catalyst that was necessary in order to bring them on to the next level, so to speak. And so, in the era that I've been in the band, the live performance is critical and crucial to the existence of the group, because the music industry has changed so dramatically from where it was in the past, where some bands could make records and almost never tour. But now, you know, the touring and seeing people face to face, this is the one thing that cannot be downloaded. It cannot be, you know, you can't experience that without, you know, closing the laptop, leaving your house, and going and getting into a concert venue with a few thousand other people, and it's a shared experience. And that really is what we want to, you know, give to people every single day. And that's I'm glad that you are as caught up in it as I am on some nights. And the nights when I look across the stage, and I'm as entertained as the audience is, because the band is that powerful. So. But again, having the new album just that supersedes and kind of takes it to a different level of focus, and it's energizes to a new degree that's really, we're very grateful for.
Again, it's been out since June, but the reviews on the mission have been really good, and of course, kind of this conceptual piece about this mission to Mars. But my question to you is, when you're putting new music together, because of course, when you put together a live show, it's pretty simple. Tommy Shaw will sing songs like Renegade and Blue Collar Man. You've got The Grand Illusion and Come Sail Away. But when you're putting together new music, how does the writing process go? Where it's like, well, this might be kind of more of a Lawrence song. Well, this is kind of a Tommy song. Kind of just describe that process.
Well, two parts to that. One is, as you mentioned, it's a tough in the live arena. It's a tough lineup to crack if you're going to put anything new in there and not have people be let down by it. It's got to be something that really they can listen to alongside the great hits that they've had in the past, and not feel like the concert's been put on pause, but in fact is leaning forward and unfolding with the proper energy. When it comes to who sings and who's the right voice on the album, for this record, because there was an underlying story, as you mentioned, it's like a NASA mission to Mars and then on to Pluto. We kind of assumed roles. So Tommy was kind of took on the pilot role, and JY was kind of the engineer. And these are roles that kind of fit our real life characters as well. And then he's kind of deemed myself to be a first officer, so that almost like almost like the consigliere, if you will.
Absolutely.
Oh. I haven't used that analogy before, but I just watched The Godfather a couple of nights ago, so I'll say that. So, and if you listen to it lyrically, Clint, you'll hear that I've heard Tommy actually in interviews say, and I'm kind of honored to hear it. Is that sometimes I'll speak a little bit like an elder brother, so to speak, in giving advice whenever we're undertaking something that's risky, so kind of to cover our bases in some manner, and lyrically, that's kind of where I'm coming from on the record. When you hear my voice come in, there's that first officer role, whereas as the Tommy being let's call him the pilot, there's far more of a kamikaze spirit there. Well, not kamikaze exactly, but more of a gung-ho.
Sure. Well, you're the young one.
It's like, let's just embrace this and see where it goes. And I'm good with that too, but with a few cautionary words along the side, or words of encouragement. And with JY, his character, and this is very true to life, he looks at the flaws and the potential for disaster and tries to mitigate those in the manner to which only he can rise. So if you listen to that, you can actually, and so I think that's part of why the story works, quite honestly, Clint, is that you can personalize that and see these kind of characters in your own life, and so it's not really that heavy-handed of a concept. It really is a rock record where one song to the next, gives its little philosophy, and you can in subtle ways you can personalize that.
Absolutely, and I think Styx has always kind of had this mystical quality about their lyrics that make an album like this seem very natural. And of course, a lot of people, they should know, but maybe if they don't, obviously before you joined Styx in 1999, you had a very successful. You're a very successful musician, but long before that, with your solo outfit, Gowan, and you have some tour dates coming up, actually solo dates coming up in November and December in Canada, where you grew up. Obviously, you're Canadian. Yeah. You're born in Scotland, as I understand, but a proud Canadian. And you got some shows coming up, some solo shows. Just tell us how that came about and what fans can look for through that.
Certainly. When I joined Styx in 1999, I decided, to really be in this band, I have to let my solo life go. I have to just leave that behind. And as you pointed out, people in America wouldn't be aware of it, but I had several platinum and multi-platinum actually albums across Canada, and had a great, fantastic following there that that was really, loyal to my own musical solo life. And I felt, it was a mixed, bittersweet feeling, in some ways. When I joined the band, I wanted to do this. I wanted to be part of this legendary group, and I knew I had to let the solo work go. But around 2009, it's funny, there were more and more, inquiries and requests for me to do some solo stuff again, and the guys in the band were very encouraging about it. They said, look, as long as it doesn't interfere with our touring schedule, go ahead and book some shows. So our manager, Charlie, who manages Styx as well, he booked a few shows for me, and at the same venues actually that I play in Canada with Styx, and they went really well. And the guys observed when I came back to the band. They said, it's funny, every time you go and do a little solo venture, you bring something new back to the band, and that can be that's in subtle ways, So that's part of why I continue to do it. So I've got 6 shows coming up at the end of the Styx touring season this year. In late November, I have some solo dates, and that's where I get to revisit that aspect of my career.
Well, that's wonderful. I think it's very important for artistic expression and to continue with what makes you happy. And right now, in the middle of Styx being busy, to be able to carve out some time for that's unbelievable. And I gotta ask you, because we talked to a lot of bands. I've talked to people like Jeff Pilson from Foreigner, bands like that.
Yeah.
What does it say about bands from that era, from let's say the 70s, from Styx to Foreigner, bands like Boston, Steve Miller Band that are still out there and still performing at such a high level? What does it say about that era of music that you guys can still put together a tour, still play in front of large numbers of people, and that everyone knows these songs? I mean, it's really an unforgettable era that I don't think will ever be replicated.
That's a really good observation. Yeah, and Jeff Pilson has been a touring partner of ours with Foreigner. And,
yep.
I mean, a musician of his caliber and what he's able to do on stage, they really, I know what you're saying. In a lot of ways, these kinds of characters were really forged in that era. Rock music is the gigantic musical statement. It's the major musical statement on planet Earth of the last half of the 20th century. So it's a music that has more than withstood the test of time. I mean, you're well over half a century of rock music that has impacted the lives of millions upon millions of people. And, to see a live rock concert is, to my mind, and perhaps to yours, the greatest form of entertainment that I've witnessed in my time on Earth. So although it's an incredible amount of fun and just a joyful experience, there's also a level of responsibility, and I don't mean that in a heavy-handed way, but there is a kind of there's a weight there that you want to make sure that these songs and these shows are done to the highest degree that they possibly can be. We had a rare night off about a week ago, and I saw Roger Waters. There's an example of a guy who's been doing this all his life, and his show is, I think, better than I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's just the Pink Floyd experience that he brings to the stage, and the players that he has with him. It's just a phenomenal, life-changing encounter when you have this. And so we, in our own way, we try to do that with what Styx is, and every rock show should be. And I've used this expression a few times. It should be kind of an epic adventure, and that's really what the mandate is. And we take it seriously, as much fun as it is. We do take it seriously.
And to me, I feel like that. I'm 33 years old. I grew up. I'm just a huge rock fan. I'm sitting here doing this interview right now because this music impacted me just like it did you, and to me, looking to the future, maybe, people accuse me of being stuck in the past. That's fine. I'll take that all day long. But to me, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of bands today that are going to move us into the next level, which I think leads us back to, okay, you got to take a band like Foreigner that, Mick Jones is still able to play shows with them, but all the rest of the members in that band, are replacement members. And guess what? When they show up, when that logo is on the marquee, people come to hear those songs. Like you said, there's a responsibility. And you know what Foreigner does? They deliver every night. Same with Styx. There are not all original members in the band Styx. You yourself may have an interesting perspective because you're not one as well. But don't you think that people's love for that music has overridden the fact that they want to get into new bands now? Because it's just like, no matter how old you get, the bands are still performing at a high level, and I think that just means so much because people still look to those songs and still need to hear those every summer. So regardless of who is original, what band members are in what band, I think it's just important that music lives on. I think that's the important thing out of all of that.
Well, you're entirely, you said the cliche, you are preaching to the choir. Because that's exactly, you have just articulated exactly how I feel about it. Now, I love the fact that you're 33. I love the fact that half the audience on any given night are around your age and even younger.
Sure.
They've embraced music to the same degree that we did growing up with it. And it's those people that understand that there are realities to life. We have a finite time on planet Earth. But I remember, and this will kind of blow your mind because I'm amazed at how much my thinking has changed because of this. I remember around 1990, reading an article with Rick Wakeman, one of the greatest keyboard players of all time, definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah.
At the top. And Rick Wakeman was talking about Yes, and someone asked him, how do you feel about there being other keyboard players have come along and been in Yes since you've been in the band? How do you feel about that? And his response was amazing. For that time, and I remember reading it and thinking, he's wrong here, but here's what he said, and I'm paraphrasing. He said, just as Yes music is as important to people as any music that's come out, in the past, where there's millions of people that love it and want to hear it. And he said, I would compare it to the London Symphony. 200 years ago, there was a London Symphony that played Beethoven. And today, there's a London Symphony that played Beethoven.
Yeah.
Okay? And the London Symphony of today may in many ways be even better than the one that existed 200 years ago. And they're playing it even better. But that's what they're keeping alive. And it's a reality of rock bands that if we want this music to continue on, it's great when there are, let's call them original members.
Sure.
Even though in Styx, Tommy Shaw points out many times he's not an original
Exactly.
member. He came in after the fifth album. Now, for a lot of bands, 5 albums is an entire career, but he came into the band after album number 5 and has made all these records and is really, such a beloved part of this group. But then, of course, you've got our drummer, Todd Zuckerman. He came into the band in 1995. Now, he's been voted #1 rock drummer in Modern Drummer magazine several times this year again. And, what he has brought to the band is equally as important in a lot of ways because that's what's helped to keep the lifeblood of the band going and to move it forward. So there's a lineage there that I think people that grew up with the band, it may be more difficult for them to embrace that. But for younger people, they seem to have greater insights to it because it's not entirely hooked to their set cast, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think the whole idea is fascinating because, again, it's bands like Styx and Kiss and bands that that I grew up with that to me it has to be kept alive somehow. And I think that's an interesting point about the symphony because that I just think that's a very interesting concept, and that's I'm glad I was able to get into that with you because sometimes I hesitate to bring it up. Like I feel like it's in some ways it's sort of condescending sometimes to bring this up, even though I don't mean it in any way condescending because to me it's just important.
I know it seems like it's a touchy subject, and I don't really know. I'm at a point now where I don't know why. Now, I remember when I read that Wakeman quote, 1990, so this is 27 years ago. I remember thinking, "Oh, that's wrong. I can't possibly accept that." and now, as you say, we've toured a lot with Foreigner, and there are nights when Mick Jones just can't make it onto the stage.
Sure.
And that show is spectacular. The
Yep.
band is so bloody strong. It doesn't matter. It's like, and they're doing the song so well. They sound as good as the record, if not better, in a lot of ways. And that's what matters. And as I just brought up, Roger Waters. He's the only guy from Pink Floyd that's on that stage. But oh my God, the other players that are up there with him, and the ladies that were singing, like on Great Gig in the Sky, it was absolutely mind-blowing, just devastating to how powerful it was, and in a lot of ways was equal to and maybe even surpassed when I saw the original lineup, in some ways. But the music is that strong. It's bigger than any one person, because that's what it is. It's bigger than life.
That is so very true, and taking that thought on into all of the shows that I plan on seeing, and I can't wait to see Styx next time. Of course, we're in Kansas City. We just caught you. You guys were here this past spring, but we got to get you guys back to the Kansas City area, because this is a big Styx town, as most towns are. Lawrence, if you've noticed, Styx is still it's such a legendary, enigmatic, unforgettable band that it's carved into the lexicon of the world forever. So that's high praise, and that includes you, of course, in this new album, The Mission. We want everyone to go to you can go to styxworld.com. Of course, the album is available on Amazon, iTunes, all those formats. Now that they have, there's quite a few ways to get an album these days that don't include going to the record store and buying it. So there's.
That's right. You can do that, but I will add the caveat that it is also available on vinyl. If you want to sit there and look at some great artwork and put a record on and listen to that, that love the scratchy needle and go through the analog experience, that's available too. So, we've been meeting people who have all formats. They have the CD,
good,
the vinyl album, and the download, so they cover all their bases.
Well,
and they still listen to it on Spotify.
You do have quite a bit of access to different means, and of course, your Twitter's @officialgowan.
Yep.
So I know that you're pretty active on social media. You can always find your dates, your solo dates that are coming up here in November and December are available. You can just follow you on @officialgowan on Twitter, and you can get all that information. Lawrence, I tell you what, I can't tell you what a pleasure, man. If there's anything we can do for you, any type of promotion we can do, you got it right here. We just can't appreciate this enough.
Well, we absolutely appreciate that. Believe me, Clint. Thank you so much. You're a passionate devotee, and I love to hear that in your voice. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you what. Next time you guys get to Kansas City, we'll have to catch up, grab some famous Kansas City barbecue, and come say hello, because it'd be a real pleasure to do that too, my man. So, best of luck on this tour.
Better do that.
Hey, absolutely. We'll make that happen. Thanks so much. Best of luck on this tour. Your solo dates. Hope everything goes well, and we'll catch up somewhere out there in the stratosphere, my man.
Let's do it. Thank you, Clint.
Thanks, Lawrence. Appreciate it.
All the best.
You too. What a pleasure it was to speak with Lawrence. Great conversation, and I tell you, the conversation about replacement band members in classic bands is one that I would like to have more often with more musicians. The truth of it is, sometimes I'm hesitant to bring it up because it's a controversial subject, and I thank Lawrence for engaging me in that conversation. I think it was good, thought-provoking stuff. There's a lot of different schools of thought on this. A lot of bands. I mean, think about this. So many of these bands have been around since the early 70s, and talk about original members. I mean, just think about members living this long. I mean, a lot of members have passed away. Business changes, you've got infighting. This just happens, and to me, it is important that these bands are able to still play at a high level, and if that means bringing in guys that can do that can help them continue, I think it's great. And I think someone like Lawrence being a part of Styx enhances the experience. I do not fault them whatsoever. A band like Foreigner that we talked about, he mentioned it. Unbelievable performances. The fans go out there to hear the music. They're hearing the music presented as well as it possibly can, and I'm all for that. I know there's different schools of thought on this, and maybe it's a case-by-case basis. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on that. So tweet us at musicmania_show. Please leave us a comment, subscribe, all that, iTunes. We always appreciate the feedback, guys. It's important. Who would you like to see us have on next? Well, let us know. Next week, we're going to be joined by LA Guns frontman Phil Lewis as they talk about, their new album, The Missing Piece, that just came out very recently, and what it means for Phil Lewis to be back working with Tracy Guns. LA Guns, one of the kings of the LA Sunset Strip scene. Can't wait to talk with Phil Lewis. That will be next week. Until then, thank you guys so much for joining me, for indulging, for getting into these conversations. I love having them, and I hope that you enjoy hearing them just as much as I do, because here on the Music Mania podcast, It's all about hearing from the musicians themselves, the legends. What I say only goes so far. These guys, that's what it's about. It's about the stories. It's about the perspective of these musicians. So thank you so much for joining me. Clint Switzer out once again from the Music Mania podcast.